It's Tara, she of all things transformational. So I recently had a request in the YouTube comments for a video covering shoulder stand or Sarvangasana, Salamba Sarvangasana. And so that's what we're going to do today. However, I would like to dispel the I would say not myth, but the technique of doing this pose flat on the floor. And so what we're gonna do to understand why not to do flat on the floor is we're gonna do it flat on the floor first, and then we're gonna start to add the blankets. So for today's practice, you definitely need a good pile of blankets. I have 4 here, and I'm also gonna show how you can use a beach towel to substitute for a blanket. But if you're using beach towels, you're gonna need more than 4. Because the idea here is that we are trying to protect our neck. The neck has a lot of ligaments that run up here. And I can attest to having done this pose flat on the floor for about 10 years and then learning how to and why to do it with blankets, that a lot of neck pain that I was chronically experiencing went away after a short amount of time of using the blankets to do the pose. So please understand that sometimes we don't necessarily understand in our bodies the benefits of doing a pose with props immediately, but it is the long-term effect that may be why we want to use the props. Also, advocating for the use of props in this position, I can definitely go up in shoulder stand without blankets. It's not a problem. And I can be there for a couple minutes, maybe, probably 2-3 minutes. Not a big deal. But I do have to work pretty hard, relatively speaking, pretty hard to stay up there. And the angles of my body and where the tension is create more challenge. Not that I'm opposed to challenge, but I like to choose the right kind of challenge. And so actually reaping the many benefits of this pose called the queen of all poses or the mother of all poses happens more effectively when we can stay up in the pose for a long time. So when we're propped, the legs become lighter in the air. We become more easily vertical in the pose. And so that enables us to stay longer. And this is a pose that is recommended in the Iyengar system to stay in for, maybe 10 to 20 minutes. So you don't always have to stay in it for 10 to 20 minutes, but how about 3 very calm minutes instead of 1 or 2 minutes where you're really kind of, forcing. The other thing is that the blankets give us the ability, like I said, to be more vertical. And without the blankets, many people will have an angle at their hips. So yeah, it's still an inversion that way, for sure. But we get a lot more, we reap more of the benefits of the pose when we get vertical. So let me show you a little bit of what I mean. And then we'll get into it with the blankets. I'm gonna do it what I call down and dirty, no props, and you can do it with me without props, and just see what it feels like. And actually, you know what, this reminds me first. This pose can be sequenced at the beginning of a practice. It can be sequenced in the middle of the practice. It could be the last pose of the practice. It could be a counter pose to back bends, or it could even be intermingled with a back bend cycle, because actually this pose is in the same family as bridge pose, half bridge pose. So when we really are doing half bridge pose, the idea here is that we want to get the shoulder blades as close together, and that's the same thing that we want to do in shoulder stand. So the one thing we're going to do today for warm up is we're going to do a little bit of shoulder opening. But I do urge you, if you want to go into the Halasana plow pose, then you might want to open up your hamstrings a little bit. You can watch a different video about how to open up the hamstrings if you're unsure how to do that safely and effectively. So you're going to want to strap for what we're going to do to open up the shoulders, okay? The strap could be a dog leash, a belt, they're not expensive, but if you don't have a yoga strap laying around, grab something else. Okay, so we're going to bring our hands behind us, palms facing the hips, and you're going to have as much space between your hands as you require for you to have the elbows fully extended. No bend in the elbows, and to start to really draw your shoulder blades together. And then we're going to move the hands away from the hips, whatever possible. I like to bring the weight a little bit back on the heels. You're welcome to lift the eyes a bit here. The idea here is for the shoulders. So we really want to get this action of bringing the shoulders together. Now, if your shoulders are more bound, maybe your hands are going to be farther apart, but the action of externally rotating your humerus bone, that should be what's happening. The work is largely in the muscles between the shoulder blades. So that would be your rhomboids, your medial lower traps, posterior serratus. So you're going to really draw those shoulder blades together. If you have more flexibility, go right ahead and clasp your hands. Taking a few more breaths here. And you can release. Now, this next one does require an actual yoga strap, so if you don't have an actual yoga strap, you may not be able to pull it off, but you can watch anyway so you can learn for when you do get your strap. Okay, so I'm going to take my strap and I'm going to make a loop with it that's just a little bit more narrow than shoulder width. So you can see how my inner elbows are a little bit more narrow than shoulder width, but I can still spread the collarbones. Okay, and then when we're going to bring this behind us, and when we bring this behind us, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to shimmy it up past your elbows. So what that's going to look like is you're going to bring it behind you, bring the arms in, and have it back like this. Okay, so the more flexibility you have, you might cinch it closed. The less flexibility you have, you're going to need it more open. So it's the same action, but this time what you're doing is you're resisting against the strap. Okay? And then again, you can bring your weight to your heels. Bring the eyes up. I'm going to not tuck my tailbone, but let the tailbone have some weight towards the floor. And really lift those arms as much as I can, reasonably lift them. Breathing. Are you breathing? And release. Okay, and these are just good things to do for your shoulders and arms anyway. Okay, so sometimes I do that when I'm in the pose. So if you want to try that in the pose, you can always do that, and I will show that. Let me get the beach towel here so that I can show you how to add that as a blanket. All right, so I tried to grab a pretty big one out of my closet. What you don't want are the thin, cheap ones. You want a pretty decent size one, okay? So think about what we're doing with the blankets. Let me bring this camera. Sorry that it's so casual, folks. We're homegrown here. What we're doing with the blankets is we're making a platform. This is a platform for your back and shoulders. So since we're making a platform, you need to make sure that the blankets have enough width across and depth that your back and your shoulders can fit. So if you're someone who's broader, you need to make your platform, you know, basically pretty generous. That's why these are, I'll show how I folded the blankets too. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this, let's see, how did I do it? Oh, I took it this way and I folded it in lengthwise half, and you'll have to mess around with whatever kind of, you know, beach towel you have. And then I used this one in thirds, and that made a platform that was pretty close in size to these other blankets. It's a little smaller, but it would work. How I folded the other blankets is I took the Mexican blanket, and this is folded in half lengthwise, fringe end to fringe end. Then I'm going to go half lengthwise, and then half that way. And look, I've got my platform, except, it's a little messy. Why don't I want it messy? Because I want a good, firm surface. So when I teach this in a class, I go around and I make sure everybody's blankets are neat and tidy, because that's their surface, that's their floor, right? That's what they're gonna press down into. So it should be well organized. I cannot overemphasize this. Now, with these 4 blankets that I have here, the bottom one sticks out a little bit more than the second. Pink one is in a little, green one's in a little, blue one's in a little. So they're kind of stepped. They're at a bit of an angle rather than being straight up and down. This is kind of important, because guess what? This is where your neck is going to be, and your neck doesn't go straight up and down. Your neck has a curve in it. So you're going to want to create a nice gradual surface for the curve of your neck. And then I'll add my beach blanket on top, just because, beach towel, because I folded it. Now, let's do the down and dirty one without any props and see how that feels. I don't recommend doing this frequently, but for the sake of today, for the sake of what we're gonna do, you can just go ahead and do one with me, and we'll examine why it's not a great plan. Okay, so from lying on your back, you're gonna get the shoulder blades underneath you. Take a nice deep breath and exhale. Lift the hips, then bring your hands quickly to the hips and start to walk the hands up towards your shoulder. Well, towards your shoulder blades is down in this case. Now, first of all, I probably look a little tipped at the hips, but not crazy. Like, I'm mostly vertical. Here's what I feel. I feel a lot of stretch at the back of my neck. I feel like a lot of my shoulder blade surface and my upper back is on the mat, and I can feel the pokey spinous processes, the bumped part that sticks out through your skin on the vertebrae, poking out. I know that my spine is in mild flexion here, and I could feel my abdomen kind of shortening, and there's a lot of weight in the rib cage. Now, if I want to get up more vertical, it puts a lot more pressure on my neck. Okay, so fine. This is fine if I want to be here like 30 seconds to a minute and a half, or whatever. Down and dirty, just want to get my legs up, I'm having fun, whatever. Not a serious practice, but I don't really recommend it too much. I wouldn't do it that often anymore. Then to come down, hands on the floor, and you gently roll down. Take a breath. You might raise the arms out to a T, and just take a breath here. And then when you're ready, you can roll off to your side. Now, I'm going to show you how to use a wall to get up. Some people have a hard time getting their legs up, especially with the blankets. So we're going to do it with a wall. I chose the slanted wall Even though I know you probably, well, maybe you don't have a slanted wall. I chose the slanted wall because I really wanted you to be able to see the profile, but also I wanted you to have the reference of the yellow and blue vertical lines on the wall so that you could see how much more vertical my body is able to get when I use the props, okay? Now, because I'm using a slanted wall, my props are farther away from the wall than they would be if I was using just a flat wall. So you're gonna have to mess around with how close your props are to the wall, depending on your height and what kind of wall you're using. And I have a bolster at the end because you need something for your hips, your tailbone to be on. If your hips are on the floor, you're gonna have a much harder time hoisting the hips back. In fact, it's possible, but it's really not great. And it's also not a good landing pad afterwards. So if you don't have a bolster, you can use a block, but you want something pretty firm there. Can't be real soft. Also, if you don't have anything that you could use for your blanket stack, okay, well, I have seen people use firm couch cushions, but they have to be firm. They cannot be cushy. If they're cushy, they won't work. It'll be too soft. So you really need something firm there. I don't want you to I don't want you to have like a box under your skull, okay? But something firm. So let's get into it and see what we do. All right, so just sit to the side here on my bolster. And then I'm gonna lay my back down on the blankets. And I've done this 100 times, well, more than 100 times. I've done this so many times I kind of know exactly how to get myself in the right position. But what I see a lot with my students is they don't know how to get themselves into the right position, and their heads will be way back here. That is not where your head should be. Your head is on the blanket, hooked on the bony ridge of the back of my head is hooked on the blanket edge. My head is not touching the floor. There's a couple inches between my head and the floor. And if you look, there's a couple inches between the edge of the blanket and my shoulders. Because when my legs go up, my head is going to go back. And I don't want my neck off of the blankets. I want my neck to be curving over the blankets. So keep in mind that you're going to go backwards. So you need to preset the position so that when you go backwards, you're still well supported. Okay. So if you have a flat wall, fine, you're going to walk your feet up the flat wall. If you have a slanted wall, fine, you're going to walk your feet up the slanted wall. Same idea here as what we did when we were standing, bringing the shoulder blades together. We're going to press the elbows into the floor, bring the shoulder blades together, and then once I'm a little bit up, I'm going to start to scoot those shoulder blades together. You can even bring the hands together or use your strap and hold the strap between the hands to bring the hands together. Okay, so you can see that my head is rolling back. Now my head's touching the floor. Take a peek at how vertical my chest and my torso are getting. Very, very vertical. So when I bring my legs up the wall, essentially I am probably in the image pretty vertical. Once the legs are up, I can choose to bring one leg away from the wall or even both legs away from the wall. Now, if you are on a flat wall, your knees are going to stay bent. And you know what? I showed this with me holding the strap, but in truth, if I was doing this normally, what I would do is I would have my hands to my back. Okay, so I'd bring the legs, I'd have the hands to the back, I'd bring the legs off one at a time or both of the wall. Now, I bet that if you look at my image compared to the image of me flat on the floor, I bet that I am a lot more vertical here. I'm much, much, much more on the top of my shoulders. I have a lot less weight on my ankles. My belly and lungs and ribs feel all much, much lighter. In fact, almost I feel a hollowing there. I could stay in this pose for quite a long time. I'm going to really reach up through the center of my pelvis, the pubis, up to the center of my heels, keeping the legs together. Of course, if you're doing the pose with the feet on a wall, that's fine. You're going to do it that way. Now, it's very important that your gluteal muscles, your butt muscles, are activated here. If you don't activate the butt muscles, you're going to pitch like this. So you've got to activate the gluteal muscles, draw the sit bones together, draw the tailbone in towards the center of the body, and breathe. Some variations here that you could play with, and you could do this with one foot on the wall, or, one foot staying raised, is you could play with splitting the legs. This is Parshvahalasana. So in this variation, I'm kind of keeping the raised leg, my left leg, I sort of keep it pegged in space and start to lower the right leg, keeping it straight. Then I'll switch, peg the right leg in space, and lower the right leg. This is where having the hamstrings opened up might be helpful. You can bring the legs down towards the forehead or the eyes, or even around the ears if you have that flexibility. That might be a little tricky to not roll backwards, but if you want to brace yourself, you could bring the arms behind you. Let the knees down to the eye sockets or alongside the head. Then there is Halasana pose, where we bring the legs straight back, and in Halasana, it's nice to either clasp hands or use the strap. If you would like to add the strap the way we did it earlier with the loop around the arms, you would take the strap, and you already have the loop set, and bring it around your upper arms. Press the arms down, press the legs back. Trying to still maintain some verticality in the length of my trunk. So I'm not overly rounding. I'm rounding, but not overly. Come back up. There's opening the legs, as in a split. Halasana, Konasana, Halasana. There's twisting. You can twist and bring the legs down. And then to come out, bend the knees. And you know what? I should take the strap off my arms. Bend the knees. Use the hands on the bolster. Roll very, very carefully down. Now, here's what I like to do afterwards. I like to release the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoot back off of this support until the edge of the support is just below my shoulder blades. And then I'm going to drop my shoulder blades to the floor. Extend the legs. Open the arms. Now, if the support is too high for you, you could absolutely take 1 or 2 blankets off. And in fact, what I think would be better would be to have the bolster lengthwise, so the legs were supported as well. And this is a supported bridge pose, half bridge pose. That's what this is. So Salamba Sarvangasana. And spend a couple minutes breathing here. And sometimes I actually end up resting in this pose because it feels so welcome after having done the shoulder stand. So I hope that this video clears up some of your inquiries and questions about shoulder stand, halasana, and the poses correlated with it. I recommend to you to play around with blankets. I really don't recommend doing this pose without blankets under the back for the protection of the neck, and I don't think one blanket does the job. But if you want to play around and see what the effects are, try it with 1, try it with 2, try it with 3, try it with 4, try it with 5. Sometimes I do it with up to 6. So anyhow, I really appreciate you watching today. I love getting requests. Sometimes I get them from people in person, and sometimes people put something in the comments. So, feel free to send me a request for a pose that you would like some demystification about, or a problem you're having that you would like to know what kind of poses to do. By the way, this pose is good for so many things. It's great for the endocrine system. It's excellent to assist with elimination, because whenever we go upside down, that helps us to aid the body in being able and ready to eliminate. It is good for sleep. It is good for mood. It is good for anxiety when done right. It is a calming pose, even though it might take some effort in the learning phase. When you get to the place where the pose has an essence of ease, it actually has an overall general effect of calming. So there's more. I mean, this pose has a whole page of effects. When you read BKS Light on Yoga, when you read the effects of this pose, there's a whole page of it. So please enjoy this mother of all poses. And if you've got something out of this video, please do all the things. You know what they are. You give it a like, you comment, you share it with somebody, and you subscribe to the channel, right? Okay, thank you so much. Namaste.